US and Iran have just wrapped up a second round of indirect nuclear talks in Geneva, and both sides are calling it meaningful progress. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said the negotiations produced good progress and that the two delegations reached an understanding on a set of guiding principles for the first time. He described the talks as more constructive than the first round in Oman earlier this month and said a clearer path forward now exists. A senior US official echoed the tone, confirming that progress was made, but stressing that many details still need to be worked out. The meetings took place inside the Omani mission in Geneva and lasted about 3 hours. Oman continues to mediate, shuttling messages between the two sides who do not sit in the same room. On the US side, President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and senior advisor Jared Kushner led the delegation. Iran sent its top diplomat, Araghchi. While the talks were happening, Iran temporarily closed parts of the Strait of Hormuz for several hours for live-fire military drills by the Revolutionary Guards. The move was announced by Iranian state media as a safety and maritime security exercise, but the timing sent a clear message. Tehran is willing to flex its muscle even as it negotiates. Why these talks are happening now is straightforward. The Trump administration has put Iran under intense pressure with fresh military deployments in the Gulf, repeated public warnings of very traumatic consequences if no deal is reached, and continued sanctions that have already crushed Iran's oil exports. At the same time, Iran faces massive domestic protests, economic pain from 40% inflation, and the knowledge that its nuclear program remains vulnerable after last year's US-Israeli strikes. Both sides appear to have calculated that talking is better than the alternative right now. How the talks are actually going is cautiously positive, but still fragile. The agreement on guiding principles is the first concrete step both sides have acknowledged publicly. Iran says it is ready to discuss capping or diluting its high-enriched uranium stockpile in exchange for verifiable sanctions relief in sectors like oil, mining, and aviation. The US side is pushing for stricter limits on enrichment levels and centrifuge numbers, plus greater IAEA access. Neither side is ready to compromise on ballistic missiles or regional proxies yet. Those remain red lines. Iran has agreed to come back in the next 2 weeks with detailed written proposals to close the remaining gaps. US officials say they will do the same. A third round could follow shortly after that. Possible consequences depend on what happens in the next few weeks. The best case scenario could be steady progress which leads to a limited interim agreement within the next month or two, something like a freeze on new enrichment above 60% in return for partial sanctions relief on oil sales and spare parts. This would lower immediate tensions, stabilize oil markets, and give both leaders a political win. But the most likely scenario is the talks continue in fits and starts. Small technical steps are agreed upon, but core issues drag on. Tensions stay high but do not explode into open conflict. However, the worst-case scenario could be one side walks away or demands too much. If Iran refuses deeper nuclear curbs or the US insists on zero enrichment, talks could collapse. That would almost certainly trigger new US or Israeli strikes on Iranian facilities, possible Iranian retaliation through proxies or the Strait of Hormuz, and a sharp spike in global oil prices. The Trump administration is coordinating closely with Israel, which continues to insist that any deal must completely dismantle Iran's enrichment capability, something Tehran has repeatedly ruled out. At the same time, Iran's supreme leader has publicly warned that any US military move would be met with a strong response. The temporary closure of the strait, even if brief, reminded the world that roughly 21% of global oil trade passes through that narrow waterway. Markets reacted immediately with a small jump in oil futures. What we are seeing is classic high-stakes diplomacy under the shadow of military force. Both sides are talking because neither wants war right now, but both are also signaling they are prepared for it if the other side overplays its hand. The next 2 weeks will be critical. If Iran delivers credible proposals and the US responds constructively, the path to a deal stays open. If either side hardens its position or walks away from the guiding principles they just agreed on, the region could slide quickly toward confrontation. The talks are moving forward, but the margin for error remains razor thin.